All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Ha, Rakah Kodash Mama. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone and the elders. Double honors to my elder as well, Aharawan Ben Yasha Allah of the Lions Den Camp here in Jacksonville, Florida. And salutations to the fellow Akim, Outwafim, and children that believe in truth and sincerity. It's your brother Athanya Allah back to you with another lesson. And Yahweh Ratazah is edifying. This is going to be a short lesson. I wanted to just touch the topic of the news on the G.D.P report that had just the initial report that came out. It's supposed to be another one coming out this month. Pretty much going, telling you pretty much where the economy stand, on this first quarter, all right, and what it's done on this first quarter, which we're at that time, all right, of famine, of, the Lord ultimately bringing his judgment and shaking a hand over this place, the second Egypt, man. The grinding ceasing, all right, because this place, America, is in the liquidation, all right. Like any place that's going out of business, you have to cut down, you have to do budget cuts and things of that nature. And instead of cutting down on the product, you would just cut down on the workers, all right. So it says here, is the report good or bad, all right? Let AI tell you. And it says the recent GDP report for the first quarter of 2025 showed a negative growth rate of 0.3%. All right, so it's negative 0.3%, which they say if the GDP shows two negative reports, it usually shows a recession. All right, which we're knee deep in. We're going into a depression. Like when it hit this place, Babylon the Great. All right, Mystery Babylon, all right, America is going to catch all these people off guard because they've been doing what? The quantitative easing, right? Printing money, which ultimately just depletes the value of the money. The more they print, the more that circulates throughout the world, all right, which makes it less valuable, all right, which that hurts them. They ultimately just shoots themselves in the foot. All right, and this is what the Lord calls them to do, all right, to be in depth with their people, all right, the elites, and as well as the other nations, as well as in depth spiritually with the Lord, man. He's getting ready. Esau is getting ready. Esau, the nation of Edom, all right, the so-called Caucasian race, all right, as the earth has been given into their hand, which is the wicked, all right, and they rule in wickedness. The money that they accumulated and they went after and stuff like that, all that's going to be an evidence against them, all right. But it says here it's in the negative rate of 0.3%, marking the first decline in 3 years. While this indicates economic weakness, experts attribute the decline primarily to a surge in imports, potentially due to businesses stocking up before tariffs took effect, reports of the BEA say. Other economic indicators like consumer spending and business investments remain strong, suggesting a mixed picture for the economy. Right, because this place is a corporation, so the rat race itself is always going to show that this place is remaining strong as far as the sense of commerce, but as far as revenue, it's in the negative. All right. And they're saying that they're blaming it on it being in the negative because of, Trump just getting into office and people did a lot of ordering. These big corporations and stuff like that did a lot of ordering, doubling up on ordering, all right, as far as outsourcing and getting the imports from the other countries and nations like China, all right. They basically doubling up on their orders and things like that because they knew Trump was coming in with the tariffs, right? Just another excuse. But when you understand what the Lord is coming to do, all right, we know that these things have to take place and these things have to happen and have to get to a peak of unbearableness, all right? It has to get worse before it get better. But here, when you go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, it says gross domestic product, the GDP, the first quarter is as you can see, is at a negative 0.3%. And last year it ended in a plus 2.4%. And it reads, Real gross domestic product, GDP, decreased at an annual rate of 0.3% in the first quarter of 2025, January, February, March. According to the advance estimate released by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, in the fourth quarter of 2024, real GDP increased 2.4%. The decrease in real GDP in the first quarter primarily reflected an increase in imports, like we just read, which are a subtraction in the calculation of GDP, and a decrease in government spending. These governments were partly offset by increase in investment, consumer spending, and exports. All right, so they're giving an excuse, and as you can see, it says the current releases was on the 30th, and the next one will be coming out on the end of this month, which is May 29th, 2025. All right. What is gross domestic product? A comprehensive measure of U.S. economic activity. GDP measures the value of the final goods, right? Final goods, meaning the complete gross. Like you have gross income, but then you have the income that you take home, right? Then it's like, it says, double counting the intermediate goods and services used up to produce them, without doubling, double counting the intermediate goods and services used up to produce them. Changes in GDP are the most popular indicator of the nation's overall economical health. All right, so right now it has a cold, a slight flu, right? As far as the economy. And it's only going to get worse. It's going to turn into a full-blown, you know what, when it comes to our Lord and Savior, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, and what he's coming to do. One of the first scriptures I want to go and get is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2. And I'll start at verse 1, just to get, the point is in 6 though. But this is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 1. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. Right? So we call to stand upon our watch, you know, sound off the alarm, you know, give the people that warning, that proper vibration. All right? You know, the watchtower, right? The lighthouse. You know, ultimately we receive the knowledge and wisdom of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, ultimately as we freely receive it, to give it, right? Just as if anybody was to have a question, we have to have an answer. You know, that's what Habakkuk was set up, just in that manner, just in that like manner. It's verse 2. And the Lord, you know, a holding post, right? But it's verse 2. And the Lord, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it, right? And what vision? The vision of what? What the Lord is coming to do. You know, his righteous indignation, his separation from the righteous, from the wicked, you know, the sheep from the goat, you know, his elect from the children of men, right? So that's the vision. You know, the conclusion of the whole matter, you know, the full spectrum of what the Lord is coming to do pertaining to his salvation and his judgments. Because everybody think that the God of the Bible is all love. Now, the God of the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, right? And those are the speckled bird who may look like the other nations, but they bear the same spirit as such. All right, he's in a perfect balance, right? He's coming to deliver and rain judgment. All right, and put these kingdoms in subjection, all right, up under his feet. So it says here in Habakkuk 2 and 2, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, right? But at the end it shall speak and not lie, and it's speaking now. And it's speaking through what? It speaks through the prophecies, right? The almond tree flourishing, you know. Ultimately, the prophecies coming to fruition of what the Lord is coming to do, him state in the second Ezra is that it's gonna be sedition among men. All right, people invading one another. All right, uproars in the streets, famine. All right, and this ultimately what the tariffs and these goods going up could cause the hyperinflation ultimately the inflation ultimately going into hyperinflation. All right, to where it's gonna be one brought for a penny, which is what a day's wage, that penny to go and get just a loaf of bread. Right, the smallest item out of the store. So it says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, is speaking, and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry, right? You know, the Lord is, he's a perfectionist when it comes to executing his judgment. All right, so he's going to dot his I's and cross his T's, like it says in the book of Ezra. He does not move nor stir till the said measure be fulfilled. All right, so he's going to accomplish and fulfill his will when it comes to his judgments and what he written in the volume of the book. That's why we are to seek out and read, all right, and learn as much as we can according to the book, all right, according to the basic instructions before leaving earth, the Bible, all right, the good news, the gospel, all right. So, hey, though it tarry, though it's taking its time, it will not tarry. It's gonna happen. All right, and we see it now through the spirit of truth. We can see the spiritual climate, the spiritual weather, and how this place is getting sick, right? Economically. This is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith, right? You know, the just is gonna live by his faith. You know, the just is going to be ultimately the elect, all right, of the Lord's people. You know, as we went into how Esau, the soul is not upright in him, all right. As the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn, but when the righteous beareth rule, the people rejoice. This whole world is in a state of mourning because the wicked is ruling, because the spirit in the individual that's ruling is not upright. All right, he's a diabolical demon. All right, he's the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan, all right, on the left-hand side. And faith is the evidence and the things that's not seen that ultimately the elect is going to have for the Heavenly Father, all right, that he's going to put this judgment, as the things that's written ultimately is going to come to pass. And this the book of Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 5, yet also because he transgresseth by wine, right, he transgresseth by wine, you know, a strange woman, you know, a strange philosophy, right, a law that's unsearchable, a law that man create, a do it thou wilt, or the YOLO lifestyle, you know, you only live once. Living it up in the flesh, because they know that this is their time, right? This is their turn, roughly paraphrasing. So it's back in verse 5 from the top again. It says, yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine, right? Another philosophy, doctrine, right? Doctrines of men, all right? Telling you everything that the Lord said and he ain't saying that, right? Teaching you everything, teaching our people everything contrary and the opposite of what Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai want, right? He is a proud man, right? And pride goeth before destruction. Neither keepeth at home who enlarges his desire as hell, right? A low condition. You know, and that's ultimately he has the state of the people around the four corners of the earth in, because that's what type of individual he is, right? And is as deaf and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. And right, that's why America was called the Great Melting Pot, right? As you had other nations coming over to America thinking that the streets was really paved with gold. They can come over and be, you know, live the American dream, right? You still have foreign exchange students coming over to this day, you know, which a lot of them is getting put on a plane and getting sent back due to Nero, Trump. So yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe, and woe represents destruction. Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, right? He built this economy, this system, ultimately after and created sweat equity, man, off of the grape, the robbery, and the murder of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans through slavery. All right, so you think he's just gonna rest with his delegates that he built off of iniquity? The Lord forbid. So it says, woe to him that increaseth that is which is not his. How long? And to him that laddeth himself with thick clay. All right, and when you go into that term clay in the etymology, it goes into debt, right? So he's accumulated debt, all right, financially and spiritually. Financially throughout the four corners of the earth and with the Most High, and as well as spiritually with Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. You know, the touching of the apple of his eye, all right? Building the economic system off of touching the apple of the Lord's eye, which is his people, the Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, all right? And those are the speckled bird, who may look like the other nations, but bear the same spirit as such, right? By way of your father. When you go into this term clay, here in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 6, it goes into
Strong's H, 5671, Avteet.
Avteet, all right, derived from the Hebrew, and it says weight of pledges, all right, heavy debts, all right. So he's put upon himself heavy debts, man, a weight of pledges that he's not going to be able to repay, all right. He's going to have to go in spiritual bankruptcy, all right. So much so to where he's trying to go into his fourth industrial revolution, to where he's trying to go from the physical, in a sense, to a spiritual slavery, in a sense, right? A digital dollar, right? From the book of Habakkuk, I want to get the book of Isaiah. Chapter 19, and I'll start at verse 14 to get to a point. The Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, Salakia. And they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. Right, this is a shit show when you look at politics and the way the economy and everything is going on throughout Babylon, America the Great. Babylon the Great, Salakia, America, Mystery Babylon, all right? Valley of the shadow of death. This is which is America. All right. This is it's a perverse mingled spirit here, to where it's not gonna suffice any longer. You know, it can't stand too much longer, and the house is divided. Right. It's a whole shit show. So hey, this is the Lord's causing this place to err. All right. Just as the ancient Egypt. This second Egypt, all right, because according to Revelations 11, verse 8, this is spiritually Sodom and Egypt, all right, America today, all right, so this is the second Egypt, man, you know, so this is going to err just like the ancient Egypt in every work, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit, man. He's not going, you don't know where he's going, you know. Even that drunken man is moved by the Spirit, right? He go end up where the Lord allow him to end up, or want him to end up, you know. And that's us all. This Isaiah 19 and 15. Neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, right, the boss or the peon, the branch of rush may do, right? So it's not going to be any work for Egypt. All right, so scriptures speak on how the grinding is going to cease. In this verse 16, in that day shall Egypt be like unto women, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it. Right, because the judgment is set. All right, and it's beginning to trickle into. It's going to begin to trickle down into the second Egypt, man. All right, to where it's going to be at the peak of Jacob's trouble, to where we got to go through the peak of Jacob's trouble ultimately to be delivered. You know, Lord's willing, those who listening and learning, we're a part of that number. This is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12 and verse 1. And I'll start from the top, and it says, remember now thy creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Right, so you have to, before all hell break loose and things get bad, you know, render yourself up to the Lord now. You know, call upon him now, seek him out now, while he may be found. You know, learn of his name, learn of his way. All right, so you can have understanding of the spiritual climate, the spiritual weather, and what's getting ready to happen. Hey, to the local streets and cities and regions near you. You know, your nearest FEMA zone, right? Because it's all gonna lead to famine. All right, uproars on the street. You know, sedition among men, you know, these tariffs and everything, because everything is already not going down from the planning. So it's ultimately going to go from that inflation to hyperinflation, all right, like the elders and apostles warned us, like the scriptures warned us, all right. You know, we coming into that third seal, right, spoken of in Revelations, and we go get that. But it says now we got to remember the Creator in the days of our youth, while we youthful, while we can worship Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, or we can go out and do the will of the Heavenly Father. You know, we can hold posts, you know. While the sun, this verse 2, or the light, or the moon, or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, right? And there go your catastrophe right there. You know, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow themselves, and then there ain't no work out here, right? That's gonna be your second Ezra, man, 15, right? The sedition among men, the people not regarding their kings nor princes, the people the policy upholders, the people who are in authority, like your judges, your police officers, because they got family too. They gonna be at home to fend for themselves. This is the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 15, and verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands. Right, this is the pressure that they're trying to build up to ultimately bust the pipes, so the people can ultimately be fed up and go in an uproar. All right, as it's been going on through other countries. All right, and it's ultimately going to trickle down and be here on the soils of America. All thus saith the Lord. All right, it's all prophecy. It's all prophetic. Pro meaning before, and size to speak. Right, so when things are spoken beforehand and they come to pass, you have to know very well there's prophets among you, right? And when prophets were sent out before the downfall of a kingdom. But this is 2nd Ezra 15. And 15, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up to fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. You know? I'm going to jump down to 19. And man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation, man. Right. There's going to be a lack of bread in the second Egypt. Jacob's trouble. And we see that being ultimately, these are the things that need to be taking place for that to happen. I'm going to go back and read up a little bit in 2nd Ezra chapter 15 and verse 10. Behold, my people is led as a flock to the slaughter. I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt. Right, and that's why it's imperative to remember now the Creator in the days of thy youth. All right, while the evil days come not, so you can be in the Lord's good gracious, and you can have the mark of the Wah, spoken of in Ezekiel chapter 9 and 4. All right, that mark going into the Wah from the Hebrew, meaning exemption, exempt from judgment. You know, you had these corporations like these big shoe companies like Nike, Adidas, and all these other big corporations trying to get an exemption from Trump as far as from the tariffs, which is smart for them to act, but what would be the point of him putting the tariffs on these countries and these other nations to begin with? If the big corporations get a bailout, it wouldn't profit any. So again, man, this is what's going to make America even be more divided, and it'll bring that famine on a lot more quicker. This is the book of James, chapter 5, and verse 1. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Right, you know, so it don't even matter how much money you got and you done accumulated. It's all corrupted and moth-eaten, and that can't buy you salvation. They can't buy you your blessing back that you gave up over 2,000 years ago for things to be playing out the way it is now. For you to be the servant sitting upon horses. You know, for Jacob ultimately be holding upon your heel, Esau, because you are the end of the world, and Jacob is going to be the beginning of it that followeth, according to 2nd Ezra 6, verse 8. So again, it's the changing of the guards, right? So this back in James 5 and verse 1. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you, right? Because he wants to set up a fourth industrial revolution, right? That's why he really don't even need the people anymore. That's also a good example of how the grinding is going to cease. Texas just in Texas, which I saw this week too. Texas just released the self-driving 18-wheelers. So that's up and running in Texas now. Locally. They're only doing it locally in Texas right now. But of course they're doing it to practice it and ultimately take the trucking industry, and that's a wrap after that. So that's a big one to look up too. The trucking, it's a trucking company that just released the first self-driving 18-wheelers, and they released them in Texas. So all this is going on at the same time, with showing you that this economy is sick. All right, you got the flu. It's getting ready to turn into a full-blown AIDS, man. So what their riches is corrupted, is moth-eaten, and they're ultimately going to show evidence of who they are, which is the wicked. In this verse 3, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasures together for the last days. Come, you know. So the Lord is, you know, the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, He avenging us. You know, we just got to keep our vow, our oath to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and wait on these prophecies. Ultimately, you know, that almond tree to fully flourish, man. These prophecies to fully come into fruition. This is Revelations chapter 6 and verse 5, and Yahweh Ratazah, this lesson was edifying. And it's Revelation 6 and 5. And it says the third seal, all right, going into what? Famine. Because what? You talking about the trucking industry on how goods and the product itself, speaking on gross domestic product, gets around in America is either by plane, by boat, or by transit. You know, a car. Well, 18-wheelers. So being them coming from a boat or in a plane, the tariffs tax, well, once they get here in America, they're going to be self-driven without the people. You know, that's even more or less jobs, right? You know, not to mention the robots and stuff that they have in these facilities like Amazon and so on and so forth. The Johnson & Johnson warehouses, right? It's all going to lead to the inflation going into hyperinflation and famine, all right? So this Revelation 6 and verse 5, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, right? Black representing, you know, dark, wicked, all right? Destruction. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. That balances goes into the yoke, all right? The pair of balances goes into the yoke, which is slavery, all right? Going into the ancient slavery or the physical slavery, leading into what we in now, which is the emancipation, approximation to where he gave people jobs. Roughly paraphrasing, that's a tongue twister for me. But where he gave people jobs, all right, you get paid this hour, you get paid that hour. He played the people that way, all right? People still going to college, getting in debt. Then, you know, you got the other nations come over here and get a trade. Then they surpass people that bid over. This is a whole Ponzi scheme that makes no sense, right? But Salaki, just to get back on topic, you know, we went from the physical slavery, which is the physical yoke, to where we at now, which is approximation, you know, sweat equity, still a form of slavery, but with like a hidden hand, which is an even worse form of slavery because it's deceptive. And then for him to tie you into the spiritual yoke that he want to put you in, which is tying the straw man to the buyer, tying your fleshly body to the corporate entity that he created through your birth certificate and social security card, right? Again, sweat equity. So it says here in verse 6, Revelation 6 and 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, right? And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine, man. So those who are going to be not hurt, not scathed from the said perils and the judgments that's coming upon this place are going to have the oil and the wine, the urim and the thummim, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, and ultimately that mark of the Wah, exemption, all right? But yes, the gross domestic product, all right? Usually they say if it's hit the negative on 2 reports, that shows a recession, which we need deep past that. So they, you know, it's just showing, you know, where we at, you know, the paperwork. When Esau paperwork starts to show his modus operandi, where we are headed, when it lines up to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai's prophecy and judgment, you know, you can write the check. But famine, all right, GDP at a negative 0.3, all right, in the first quarter of Nero being back in office, and we'll see where this take us. But Lord's willing, it take us to open the floodgates to what we know is to be the end. Shalom, Habatah, and DTA, until the next one.